Hi, welcome to the Good Return podcast. I'm your host, Enoch, and today we'll be interviewing my co-host, Pedro. Welcome, Pedro.
Thank you, Enoch, for having me.
I would love to know more about what you do, what you're passionate about, what are some of the things you've been involved in the past.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Peru, and I went to the American High School of Lima in La Molina, and I've always had a passion for building, creating, and innovating. Both my parents are entrepreneurs and engineers and makers, but most importantly, both my parents are people who have faith and who are faith-driven entrepreneurs. So as a kid growing up in Peru, I remember walking with mom and dad in a parcel of land or a terrain, just a lot of dirt. And I would ask, like, Mom, Dad, what are we going to do here? And they would say, like, hey, we have a dream. We're going to start a business, either like a 5-star resort or a Toyota dealership or a gas station. We're going to hire people, support the local economy, and create jobs. And that, Enoch, really fueled my motivation to become an entrepreneur at a very young age. 100% seeing what mom and dad did for a living, but most importantly, seeing how they were very intentional in having a well-rounded life. I think my first memory as a kid of my mom was she would take me to Gold's Gym. I would go to the kids section and play some games and Connect Four and these board games, and she would go work out for an hour. Zumba or weightlifting, and then she'd go to the office and hire people and give a speech, and honestly also just share the word and do a Bible study with our employees. And I was like, wow, my mom's a rock star. And same thing with my dad. You know, we'd wake up early, 8 a.m., go play tennis, doubles on red clay in Peru and Lima, and then go to Autospar or go to the gas stations and liquefied natural gas and him like inaugurating a new station or giving a speech and saying thank you to investors and the press and the media, and also seeing him give a Bible study to our employees about joy, about faith and patience.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. And I want to also ask about entrepreneurship. A student at a college or maybe a corporate worker in the field that wants to get into business and startups and entrepreneurship, what type of advice you would have for such people that want to get into this space?
First, without a doubt, it's the mindset. And that's the hardest thing to teach, Enoch. It's much easier to teach someone to code Python or C++ or JavaScript or whatever than teaching a young man to become resilient, to become empathetic, to be patient, to be CEO material, right? Like chief emotional officer for a Fortune 500 company. And that's extremely hard, especially because today in AI, everybody's focusing, Enoch, on hard skills, on LLMs or real world models we were talking about the other day, and Gen AI and AGI, but people are forgetting on our humanity, on just being human and really excelling in emotional intelligence. I think soft skills are what definitely will set apart a future leader than a regular rock star software engineer. To answer your question, I'm a firm believer that the first step is the mindset, and the second step is who do you surround yourself with? You're the average of the first 5 people that you spend your time with. You hit tennis balls or play Mario Kart, or you pray or you eat, wine and dine, whatever. And you have to be intentional in building your personal board of directors. Because if you don't have those mentors, those sponsors who vouch for you, Enoch, when you're not there in the boardroom, in the hiring room, in the VC room, no one's going to open doors for you. And that's what makes the difference between a sponsor and a mentor. A mentor is a person who gives you advice. And as Gen Zs, as millennials, we have a bunch of people who give you advice at Stanford, at Berkeley, at Harvard. But sponsors, Enoch, the people who actually are wearing your suit when you're not there and saying, hey, I know Enoch, he was a master's in computer science at Stanford. He kicked it. Like, let's give him the opportunity to be senior director of engineering at Meta. Like, those people are the ones who have the skin in the game. And they don't really care about your feelings. They care more about God's will in your life and pushing you and pruning you to become the next level.
So let's just say you are a student who is driven. but not quite sure about what next steps to take and looking for partners and sponsors?
The first component, without a doubt, is values. You can't really start a friendship, a relationship, a business partnership without principles, without value to someone. And for me, what's always worked is focusing on what drives them. The human soul, Enoch, is a factory of idols. And for those of you, or for those of us who say that we're not religious or spiritual or whatever, in the end, you're your own God. I mean, I've met so many people here in Silicon Valley where they're like, oh, I grew up Catholic or Protestant, but then I left the church, or I was a bit Buddhist, but not really. But then I'm like, what drives you? And they're like, oh, well, I decide my future. I decide my life. I decide what I'm gonna do, a co-term, a startup, a second master's, a JD. And so in the end, they're deciding their own and micromanaging their lives. And they are their own quote unquote Lord and Savior, right? And so if we don't acknowledge the truth, we're going to become slaves to something. Going back to your question, it's really important to find a mentor and an investor that shares your same values. For me, I mentioned a bit about high school in Peru. I actually, Enoch, dropped out of IB and AP honors. My principal was super mad. He was actually pissed because my older sister, Karina, got into Stanford undergrad. And he was like, Pedro, forget university in the US, you're gonna stay in Peru. I looked at him and honestly, Enoch, it did hurt. I was a bit sad. I was a bit upset. But I did not argue or fight him. It's really not my personality to fight people. And I was like, Mr. Nicholson, we'll see. We'll see what God brings. No one size education fits all in my mind, and people get into college in many different forms. Granted, this is 2011, right? So I'm a dinosaur by now. And I worked hard. My GPA went up, substantially speaking, because obviously IB is much more hardcore studying and academic, rigorous and everything. And I ended up with a 3.9 by God's grace, unweighted. And I presided over the Music Honor Society. I presided over the Business Honor Society. I played for the tennis team at Jockey Club, like varsity. We actually won national interclubs. Peru's a small country, 36 million people. And I did pretty well, by God's grace. But I remember every day, especially with my mom, Enoch, because I've always been a bit more of the Energizer Bunny, ADD, ADHD, whatever. And my mom and I would always pray, like kneel down in our bed and just be like, God, like, here are my grades. Like, here's my like high school challenges. This is my report card, like parents teacher conference, like guide me, Lord. Because as a kid, I did struggle academically. And in the end, I did pretty well and I applied to colleges, and by God's grace, Berkeley accepted me with merit-based scholarships. And it was crazy because like the first 7 schools, Enoch, were rejections. And they were decent schools like UCLA or UC Davis or UC Riverside, I think Miami, Vanderbilt, Cornell. They were not bad schools, and I got rejected. I was like, snap, if I can't get into UC Riverside, I don't think I'm gonna get into Berkeley, right? It's like, but God made it clear. And during my interviews at Berkeley for scholarships, my interviewer actually was like, Pedro, like the fact that you have this like entrepreneurial spirit and you care about social impact and like faith and work, you should start a company here in the Bay Area because Berkeley's next to San Francisco, capital of venture capital and everything, to scale your business. And that really intrigued me, Enoch, to start a company at the age of 19.
Yeah, on a related note, I want to also ask you about what are some of the struggles you had in life and how you overcame those struggles, and also whether there was this pivotal moment in your life that really kick-started your career as an entrepreneur.
What marked my childhood was definitely, as a kid, I was the most gregarious, like energetic, happy kid. As a kid, I would always like raise my hand, ask questions, run around, ask again, public speaking. And sadly, Enoch, those traits were seen negatively in Peru. So as a 3rd grader, I was 8 years old, and I had a behavioral clipboard every day. So I had to take my clipboard to my teacher, if it's music or language arts or Spanish or English, and they had to rank me. They had to rate me 1 through 10. How did I do? That was a pretty dark and bad feeling for an 8-year-old. And then God knows why this happened. My mom had to renew her green card, and we had to spend more time in the US, obviously. So out of all places, we went to Nashville, Tennessee. I remember first week of class, kids were like, where are you from? Where are you from? Where's your family from? And I was like, oh yeah, we're from Peru. And we're like 9 or 10 years old. And they're like, oh, but where's Peru? And I was like, guys, it's in South America. And I was, oh wait, where's South America? Where's South America? So I had to like stand up and like pull the Rand McNally map and show everybody like, hey, this is North America, this is South America. You know, Peru is next to the Pacific Ocean, and Brazil and the Amazon. And my teacher, Miss Lee Parrish at David Lipscomb Middle School, elementary school, she was like, wow, Pedro, the fact that you love public speaking and like you take risks, that's very entrepreneurial. Immediately, Enoch, when she approached me, I thought I was in trouble. I was a bit sad, I was scared, I was a bit nervous. I mean, I was 8, right? And a teacher who's like triple your height comes with emotions. But no, she was so encouraging, Miss Parrish. And she was like, Pedro, the fact that you like asking questions and you have like that intellectual vitality and curiosity, it's good. And so that completely changed my perspective as a student, as a learner, as an entrepreneur. I came back to Peru at the age of 11 with a completely different perception of who Pedro David Espinoza is. Number 1, son of God. And number 2, I loved working and studying and learning and asking questions, talking about faith-driven entrepreneurship.
That's awesome. Yeah, educators, so important. I can definitely resonate with that for sure. I want to jump back a little bit, ask in the hat of someone who's maybe not faith-driven at all. So, for example, I see a lot of friends who are like, oh, what's wrong with me taking control of my life? That sounds great. You know, that doesn't sound like a bad thing at all. So I want you to kind of elaborate on why you think that's different from the principles that you hold. And I would love for you to elaborate a bit more on what you think about that kind of mindset in the Valley.
For me, it's really thinking long-term and thinking impact. I've personally seen how money in many ways creates a lot of problems. Because either people want your money or people ask for you to invest in their startup or fundraising a nonprofit and bug you. And especially growing up in Peru, which is a developing country, especially in the 90s, 80s, I mean, there was terrorism and lack of security was an issue. And I mean, not my family, but I've had friends who friends of friends who were kidnapped or something. So I always knew as a kid that like, it's not about me. And like, I don't want to be like the center of attention for this whole thing. Of course, I see money as a tool to bless people, to employ people, to hire people, to create a business. But I never saw money as an end goal. I see money as a byproduct of laser-focused hard work. When I think of these questions that you ask, Enoch, it brings me back to scripture that life on earth is short, that flowers wither and the wind blows, but the word of the Lord stands forever. The word of God stands firm forever. And just last night, I spoke at JP Morgan here in San Francisco for YPO, and I'm part of the Young Presidents Organization. And I was talking to a good friend, Chris. He was the moderator of my panel. And he was just sharing like these top 10 family offices in the world. Like we're talking about billionaires, right? Like literally like the Ballmers or the Gates or the Zuckerbergs of the world. And he did not share a specific name, but he worked with the top 10, top 15 families in the world. How the first generation, like the mom who started the business, she would literally pay $3 billion to have her 3 sons on the Thanksgiving dinner together for a meal.
Yeah.
She would spend, let me repeat, $3 billion to have her 3 kids sit together for Christmas, for Easter, for Thanksgiving. And sadly, many times, money tends to divide people. When people get stingy, either themselves or their partners, the in-laws, things get a bit more nuanced and complicated once you marry someone, you have in-laws, you have kids, your partner pushes you, and who am I to judge? But my point is, if we're seeing the wealthiest Silicon Valley residents and people who live in Los Altos Hills or Atherton, and them willing to spend a third of their fortune, and having that family unity and having that peace, I think that speaks volumes. I think in the end, people want to be loved, people want to be seen, people want to be heard, and people want to have a solid and stable family. And it's really sad here in the US that divorce rates are more than 50%. And this is not me bashing America. I love the US. I became a citizen 10 years ago. It's a great country. I started my first company here. I went to Berkeley first, and I took classes at Stanford. I started my first company, SmileyGo, there, and then I went to Harvard. I love this country. But one thing is that we see the divorce rates and we see a lot of wealth. But like I mentioned, right, these people who perhaps happen to be Christian, happen to be atheist or agnostic, they regret many things in life.
But I also want to ask as a follow-up how your purpose-driven mindset and faith-driven values ground you to have wisdom and allow you to be successful in your ventures and businesses and investments.
One story that comes to mind is in 2015, I remember I had Ron Gonzalez's phone number in my iPhone, and he was the mayor of San Jose, the first Latino mayor. So I had him as RG. And the funny thing is, at the time I was going to church in Calvary Temple Bay Church in Concord, East Bay. And I texted the wrong RG.
Oh.
And I was like, hey man, I'm gonna go to Costco and buy chicken wings and pizza and salad. I love Caesar salad. And then we're gonna read Proverbs 3 and hang out. And then Mayor Ron replied, Enoch, with a question mark. And I was like, snap, he's gonna think I'm weird. He's gonna block me, unfriend me on LinkedIn. Who goes to church in the Bay Area? Everyone's a workaholic here. But I took that failure as an opportunity to create a meaningful conversation with Mayor Ron. I texted Ron, I was like, so sorry, Mayor. Now that I brought this up, did you grow up going to church, or are you spiritual? Because I brought up a Bible study. And on the iMessage, he was actually, Pedro, yeah, I grew up Catholic, I'm Mexican American. I was like, oh, that's cool. And then since I mentioned, the chicken wings and then ultimate Frisbee, I was like, Mayor Gonzalez, do you exercise? Do you walk? Are you into wellness? And he was like, yeah, I actually go to the driving range. I hike the dish with my wife. And I was like, oh. So we started chatting, right? I was bluntly honest. I was like, hey, I messed up, but who cares? I moved on. And at the end of the iMessage conversation, Enoch, I got a coffee date with him, an appointment. And a month later, we meet up at Starbucks in downtown San Jose. And he just shares about his political career. He went to San Jose State and UC Santa Cruz. He shared about the different boards that he's in. And keep in mind, I was 20, right? It was 11 years ago. And then I asked him eventually to join the board of directors of my company, SmileyGo. And then a year later, Enoch, you may ask, who got you in front of the decision maker at San Jose Water Company, at Google, at Motorola, at Dropbox, at Twitter, to become users, to become clients of your software as a service, of your SaaS solution? And of course, it was Ron, the mayor of Silicon Valley. He's been a public servant for years, and thanks to him, he made those warm intros, right? So having those sponsors and people who know you and being honest with them of who you are and what you do and why you do, they're gonna back you up. And if they don't, it's okay. You can agree to disagree. You date before you marry. And to finish the story, in 2016, which is a great year, I asked Ron, hey, do you know any other Peruvians in the Bay Area? Because Peru is a small country. And he was like, yeah, I know one other Peruvian. His name is Jorge. He went to Stanford. He's 56. He could be your dad. And he's the CEO of Silicon Graphics International. And I'm sure the boomers in this room would appreciate, but SGI used to be a huge company in the 90s. It was the Lily of Silicon Valley. SGI did all the graphics for The Matrix, for Jurassic Park, big company. So I met Jorge from Peru. He went to Stanford, and we clicked. With Jorge, he was also raised by a powerful mom. His mom is a physician, a doctor. And keep in mind, this is like 60, 50 years ago back in Peru, which is a chauvinistic country. And we bonded. My mom's an engineer. She's an entrepreneur. She's an author, investor. And so we kicked it with Jorge. And I was like, Jorge, you've been CEO twice. You sold Verigy for $2 billion. You're selling SGI to Hewlett Packard Enterprise for $500 million. Like, we both have amazing networks, Stanford, Berkeley, YPO, World Economic Forum. Why don't we partner and like write a book on the future of work, on skills, on diversity of experience for startups and Fortune 500s? And he was like, yeah, I'm down to do it. But he's like, I have no time. I was like, don't worry, I'm like half your age. I can do all the nitty gritty work, but you gotta help me and introduce me to some of your friends. 2 years later, Enoch, we're like meeting with Reed Hastings, who's good friends with Jorge. We're meeting with Eric Schmidt, thanks to my mentor, Bill Coleman. We're meeting with Dan Schulman from PayPal. And we're interviewing these like top caliber CEOs on tough questions. How do you hire people? How do you fire people? How do you retain future next gen leaders? How do you attract diverse talent? And it was a blessing. I loved writing a book with him. We did 2, and by God's grace, here we are.
Wow. So that accidental transparency actually led you to all these different connections and journeys and partnerships, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
Second to final question is, what advice do you have for the future generation regarding networking and connecting with people? It seems like you have such a gift for connecting with people and transparency.
Yeah, I mean, one, for introverted in the rooms, I think COVID definitely helped, because a lot of the networking meetings and speed dating, most things were on Zoom, virtual. And even till today, a lot of events are hybrid. Even the YPO event at JP Morgan, I spoke last night, there was a hybrid option. So if you're shy, nothing wrong with that. You can just send a message on LinkedIn or Teams or Slack, right? You don't have to walk the cubicle at Googleplex or whatever and draw a huge sign on the whiteboard, say, hey, I'm Pedro, I need a mentor. No, everything is more digitalized, and you can send a message on Slack. I think most people are comfortable just asking a question. However, most important, number 2, I would say, don't be emotional. And I really mean this, and it's funny, right? The Latin guy saying don't be emotional, because we tend to be loud and emotional. But when people ghost you, don't take it personal. When people not reply, it's not because they hate you, it's because people are people, they're human. They're going through a divorce, they're becoming a father or grandfather, or their kids are going through a divorce, or their mom or dad died with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, or they're just traveling to Horasis or Davos for 2 weeks. And people are just busy and they're human. Life happens, right? And many times I've met so many young people, you know, at Stanford, at Berkeley, that they give up too easily. We need to, and I'm preaching this to myself, we need to stop being wimps. Like, if they don't reply for once, follow up twice, 3, 4 times, and diversify that too. You're gonna get the same result if you try the same strategy. For me, what's always worked is, if they don't reply on iMessage, email them. If they don't reply when you send an email, send them a Slack or a Teams or a Stanford email, maybe your Gmail, maybe your Berkeley email, maybe send them a snail mail. My mentors, my investors, I have their physical address, and every year, for Christmas or New Year's or Thanksgiving, I just send a thank you card. And many times they reply. But keep in mind, you have to get your first 7 or 8 no's to then get a maybe, to then get your first yes. But the problem is, a lot of young people give up way too easily. I remember when I was a frosh at Berkeley, I was taking multivariable calculus for the STEM people in the room, and it was at 8 a.m. It killed me, man, it killed me. And one day I woke up, it was like 8:45 a.m., and I had to make a very important life decision. Go to class or eat. As a good Peruvian, I opted for food. That's why I'm super fat. And so I went to the Golden Bear Cafe, and I remember seeing this like 80-year-old gray hair businessman wearing a suit and a tie. Mom would always say, Pedro David, júntate con los mejores. Surround yourself with the wisest, with the best. So I approach this old man. I'm like, hey, can I grab breakfast next to you? And he's like, sure, my name is Frank Baxter. I'm like, oh, I'm Pedro Espinoza. And we start chit-chatting, and I immediately see Enoch. He has a flag, a pin on his suit from Uruguay. And I was like, Frank, why are you wearing a Latin American flag on your suit? We're all freshmen here. You seem to be very wise. I did not say old. And I was like, why are you a diplomat or something? He's like, yeah, I used to be the US ambassador to Uruguay under President Bush. We start speaking in Spanish. Two people in 1936 from 1984, we start speaking. Different backgrounds, ethnicities, political affiliations, religions, generations, different mother tongues, but we bonded over language. At the end, he offers his business card, I give him mine. Turns out that Frank was the CEO, chairman emeritus of Jefferies, a huge global investment bank in New York. And I was doing my first fintech company. All these things in common, right? Fintech, he was a trustee at Berkeley. His board meeting got canceled, delayed. He had to eat. He was eating on campus. I got super late to class. But every 3 months, Enoch, I would send him the Pedro newsletter of my challenges, my strengths, my weaknesses, my opportunities, a SWOT analysis. And I was frank with Frank. I was like, hey, I have this roommate problem. Or hey, I'm a bit homesick. I miss ceviche in Peru. Or hey, I broke up with my girlfriend in high school, but I still think of her. I was just honest. I was being me. I was being human. Or hey, I have this question about apologetics. And I think Frank really appreciated the vulnerability in my emails and communications and cadence meetings. Later, after 2 years of this friendship and mentorship, Enoch, can you guess who was the first investor in my second company? It was Frank Baxter, the chairman of Jefferies, the CEO, the ambassador of Uruguay. But all of this takes time. I think many, many times young people expect things to be done for yesterday, but building trust takes a long time. Building empathy and patience and relationships with a mentor and investor, it takes time. We have to be patient. We have to think 7, 10, 20 years, 40, 50 years from now. We don't have to think for 3 days from now. And I'll end with this bilateral mentorship, Enoch. You don't have to be a baby boomer to help another baby boomer. You don't have to be an ambassador to help another ambassador, a CEO to help another CEO. Many times Gen Z's, young people, we think, oh, I have to be rich to help a rich guy. Not at all. I asked Frank when I was 19, I was like, Frank, how can I help you? So funny, right? I was 19, immigrant from Peru, middle of nowhere, international student. My parents have no idea what VMware or Cisco are, because they're not stupid, but they don't work in Silicon Valley. They're more like brick and mortar energy business. And Frank was like, actually, I'm hosting a seminar, a Latin American civics seminar from the 20th and 19th century, like Pinochet and Fujimori and all these politicians in South America. And he's like, I don't really have South American, Latin, Central American friends who are 18, 19, 20. Can you invite students to come to my seminar? And I was like, are you kidding? I play soccer twice a week with people from Guatemala, from Venezuela, from Cuba, from Argentina. These are my buddies who are 19-year-olds. So I helped him. You see, you don't have to give cash to help, but there's so many ways, tangible ways, that as a young person, you can help another senior CEO or board trustee.
Opportunities are everywhere. You just got to be able to use what you have, even soccer, right?
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Final question to close us off.
Yeah.
What last piece of advice do you have for everyone watching?
I want to leave you with, be relational over transactional. And I truly mean this from my heart. Focus on just being a friend, on being an advisor, on listening. People want to be heard. Everybody has a story, especially when you're a student, which I know many of us here in the room are undergrads, grad students. People love helping students, even yesterday at the YPO event, they were like, oh, you look young, let me help you with the podcast or the media startup. Leverage that student hat. Use your school email.edu and ask for 10-minute advice. People love giving advice. People love helping, especially when someone has already helped you, right? So let's say you already got your CS, your Stanford computer science professor to help you. Well, then briefly mention it. I'm not telling you to name drop, not at all, but just say I took this class from, Andrew Ng, and I loved it. And I would love to ask you questions about machine learning, unsupervised stuff. Or I would love to ask you questions about LLMs or AGI. Just short asks via email or LinkedIn go a long way. Never ask for an hour interview or coaching session, and never say I want you to be my mentor. That is super awkward. Always focus on being genuine and relational and just being you. I think when I was taking the Sparks workshop at MSNE at Stanford, I remember I met Jack Fuchs and he was wearing tennis shoes, Enoch. And immediately I was just blunt. I was like, hey, like you play tennis? I love tennis. We should go for a run, play some tennis, some pickleball. And just be honest, you know? And if you don't like something, just say you don't like it. You know, like, I think one thing that the US culture could be better and other cultures is like, just be more direct. Just be upfront. And like, that way, you know who you click with, mentor, investor-wise, and who you don't click with.
Yeah, thank you so much for these amazing advice. Yeah, pleasure to have you as my friend and co-host.
Thank you, Enoch. God bless.
Yeah, God bless.
Such an honor.
All right.
Thank you.